Wilting Posies by Mereneth. Sunburst lingered in a dusty, long-unused room of his home, revisiting memories from nearly 20 years before. His golden-yellow coat and red mane caught the light of the setting sun and bathed the walls to his left in pastel yellow and pink. Against the same wall was a dresser, on top of which sat several framed pictures of a mare whose coat and mane colours mirrored those shining on the wall. The scenes in the picture varied. One was of the mare stretching her pastel yellow wings and looking on the viewer with a smile. Another as she ran, a brush through her pastel pink mane, one eye focused towards the camera and a pleased smile on her face. She was clearly very pregnant and was practically radiating love. At a glance, one could tell it had been taken in the same room. A brush next to the frame with several long strands of pink hair further proof. It was the same brush from the picture. Several other photos were clustered with the rest, all of the same mare. There was not a single picture that didn't have her offering the camera a loving smile. Sunburst turned away from the dresser, shifting his attention towards a bed beneath the window. Like the rest of the room, it was clear. It hadn't been touched in a long time. The sheets were pushed back, and the pillow held a faint indent where a pony's head once laid, though time had smoothed it in places. A few strands of pink hair decorated the pillow. Fine yellow hair lay scattered on the sheets in places. Tears had begun trickling from Sunburst's eyes as memories filled his mind and longing tugged at his heart. Even as the emotions welled up within him, he kept on a smile on his face. He blinked away the tears and turned away from the bed, facing the wall opposite the dresser as his emotions threatened to overwhelm him before he was finished paying his respects. On the wall he now faced where a great many pictures of a filly hung in what appeared to be a timeline. The oldest photo was of the pony as a very young foal. Her legs were tucked beneath her and her eyes closed in peaceful sleep. The filly's short mane and tail were little more than tufts of pink hair with slight curls, and her pastel yellow coat a silky soft fuzz. Each photo showed the filly older, though there was a visible difference in her age between the fifth and sixth picture, from ungainly toddler to skinny adolescent. She turns 19 today, Posy. I know I tell you this every year, but you'd be so proud of her. She's grown up so well. She's strong and healthy, and so much like you. Sunburst went quiet and let the tears he had been holding back flow. His head drooped as his emotional dam broke, and he let himself cry quietly. He slowly composed himself and brought his head up to look at the picture again. He took a deep breath and let it out to settle himself before speaking again. She reminds me of you so much, Posy. You weren't as timid, but the love she offers those around her always makes me think of you as well. I'll put up another picture for you tonight, like always. Maybe one day I'll get the heart to show Fluttershy your room. You would both like that. Before his emotions could overwhelm him again, he backed out of the room and pulled the door closed. Several tears fell onto the door handle as he locked up. With a heavy heart, he turned away and wiped his eyes with a hoof before heading to the dining room to finish preparations. Fluttershy would be coming soon for their normal evening celebration of her birthday. Their birthday evenings together were rarely different. Fluttershy would choose a small cake for them to share, and he would prepare the dinner for them. It was the same comfortable ritual they had been doing since she had graduated from flight school, and unbeknownst to her, it was the same thing he had done since she had been born. The dining room was already set up with a simple dinner laid out. The only thing missing was the main course, which was finishing cooking in the oven. In place of a plate at Fluttershy's side was a small gift, another tradition that had worked its way into their routine. A knock at the front door raised his spirits. Sunburst already knew who it was, even before he heard the door open or that soft, lilting voice that called out moments after. "Father, Are you home? I brought the cake. It's chocolate. I hope that's okay with you. He nearly broke into tears again as Fluttershy walked into the dining room. She looked almost exactly like her mother when he first met her. He could only smile and let his love for her show, despite the feelings of loss that pounded at his heart. He loved Fluttershy as dearly as he had her mother, as much as any father could feel love for his daughter. But it was growing harder each year to see her walk through his door and not feel the pangs of loss for her mother. He harboured no hate for his daughter. He knew what happened wasn't her fault, but between her looks and the memories and feelings of loss he had begun to wonder just how much longer he could hold himself together whenever she came to spend time with him. Happy birthday, birthday girl. It is your party, so if chocolate cake is what you want, you know I'm fine with it. You ready to open your gift? Going to be a little while before the food is cooked, so may as well open it now. Okay, but I wanted to ask you a question first, if that's okay. Sunburst tilted his head to the side, puzzled. He knew she had a shy and timid nature, but she had never acted like that with him before. Whatever she was going to ask, she felt the need to build up her nerves to do so, even though she was asking the one pony she had never before acted shy towards before. You know that. Whatever it is, you can ask me. I'm always here for whatever you need, sweetling. Fluttershy nodded and let out a deep breath, her smile creeping back onto her face. She took another deep breath before voicing her question. For as long as I can remember, it has only been the two of us. I always wondered, but I never had the courage to ask where Mum was. I was hoping you would tell me. I was the only filly in flight school who didn't know her mother, the only filly in Ponyville. While I was little, who never said, my mum is waiting at home. What I want to ask, She went silent and pressed her eyes shut as nervous tension built up and spoiled her courage. Sunburst knew that the best way to get the rest out of her was to just wait for the tension to pass and let her build up her lost courage again. It wasn't helping his nerves or emotions, though, with the direction it was taking. He had long expected it, though, so it wasn't a total shock to have her finally ask. It took a few minutes, but with no pressure on her, she recovered quickly. I want to know about Mum. Where is she? Did something happen to her? Please tell me. Even with the time to brace himself for it, his heart lurched as she finally asked the question. She deserved to know. There was no doubt about that, but he worried how it might affect her when she was finally told the truth of it. She had wonderful friends to lend her a shoulder, and she had him, but still, he worried for her. Pushing back his emotions and tears, he braced himself to bring up old memories. He had hoped to not recall any of it, but the most fond and joyful of them, unless he was at Posie's grave or in her room. He had always known, though, that he was lying to himself to ever think he would ever need to recount them to his daughter. Sweetling, it's a long tale. You go sit on a couch in the living room while I turn off the oven. You of all ponies deserve the answer to those questions. Sunburst got up and went to the kitchen to do as he said he would, leaving Fluttershy to move to the other room in her own time. He turned the oven off and turned to look into the living room and watched his daughter settle onto a couch. He took a long, shuddering breath and stared at the ceiling, forcing down the turbulent feelings hammering at his will. Posy, please help me have the strength to tell her everything. I can't do this alone. So please just be there with me, in my heart and in spirit. our daughter. She needs to know what happened." As he left the kitchen, he ignored the tears rolling down his cheeks. He had to be strong for his daughter, for Fluttershy. He heaved a sigh and took a seat on the floor, then turned his attention to her. I'll start with a joyful memory, for both of our sakes, because the fact is, the tale itself is far from joyful. Your mother needs to be remembered for the pony she was, and not for the sad things that happened to her. She was like you, kind and loving, always full of smiles and willing to help any pony in need. Even when she was pregnant with you, she never frowned or scowled, the way I remember Posy. The silence of a massive field of wildflowers was disturbed by happy, shrill laughter, followed shortly by a mare running at a canter. She laughed again and tossed her head to jostle her pastel pink mane to get leaves out of her hair as her hooves sent clouds of wildflower petals into the air that curled into her wake. Her pastel yellow coat contrasted perfectly against the cloud of colour. It almost seemed that she was an ever-changing palette of colour rushing across the field. She was heavily pregnant, though. From the sounds of joy and excitement alone, one could tell she was in no trouble. She was only a joyful mare in her element. Another deeper sound of laughter followed shortly, and a stallion with a glistening coat of golden yellow and a rich red mane touched with a hint of orange, not far akin from the glow of the sun over clouds, came over the hill in her trail, sending the twirling trail of flowers to all sides in a vibrant firework display of natural beauty. The pair slowed up and drew up side by side as they neared the end of the field where forest began, both breathing heavily and smiling as they nuzzled one another. The mare whispered into her companion's ear and walked around him to nuzzle at his cutie mark, that of a rising sun, shining brightly as it came from behind clouds. He gently nosed her heavy sides in turn, and then rested his head against her belly to listen to the soon-to-be-born foal within. The ear not pressed to her side perked at the soft humps of movement within, eliciting a happy laugh before he returned her earlier affections by nuzzling her cutie mark. 3 tulips in pale blues and greens. The stallion stepped aside after a moment and practically pranced around in front of the mare and bumped her snout gently with his own. "Posy, I don't think I could be happier. We have each other. We have our dream home that we saved for together. I got the delivery job with Sweet Apple Acres, and your parents finally accepted me despite being an earth pony. There isn't much longer until you're due, too. I can hardly believe I'll be a father soon. Oh, Celestia, we haven't even come up with a name yet." At the realization, he began pacing, hooves quickly gouging and tearing up the soft loam and the mosses growing beneath the tree lines. Each turn dislodged blossoms and petals that had caught in his mane during the run, occasionally flinging them unintentionally at Posy. She smiled warmly and stepped forward to intercept him, hooking her neck beneath his to get him to stop and face her. "Be calm, Sunburst. You may have been too occupied to think of names, but not to worry. I have a few ideas for either filly or colt that I like, and I believe you will as well. If our foal is a colt, my favourite 2 are Sunspark, after you, and Windwhisper. If a filly, I like Fluttershy the most, or Cherry Blossom. Will those work for you?" He nodded, satisfied but still bursting with nervous, excited energy. He was going to be a father so soon, and he wanted to buck and yell his joy to the world. As he calmed down, he kept his gaze on Posy, drawing in the love she practically radiated and the warmth from her smile. He loved every inch of her existence, from mane to tail, wings, tips to hooves. There was no sparkle or talent or flaw in any form that was a part of her, and what she represented that he did not love. If I'm not a pony of creative talents, Posy, but I always desire to find more ways to tell and show you my love for you. I know that no matter how poorly I might express my feelings, you will always accept them for what they represent. I got you a small gift. It's sitting on your bed at home. When you're ready, we can head back so that you can open it. We have all the time in the world I'll fold you soon. The Apple family has given me time off to stay at your side until he or she is born and settled into our lives. I know how much you love these fields, so we don't need to leave until you're ready to. He pressed his chin down onto her neck in a hug, taking pleasure from the touch of her coat against his. She returned the affection in the same silent manner, pressing her body against his, both of them simply enjoying the presence of the other. A breeze caressed their manes and swept spring blooms down on top of them from the branches overhead. In unison they sighed, the simple pleasure of togetherness and solitude offering a unique calm and peace. They remained embraced as the sun crept past its peak, and for several minutes longer, until Posy stepped back and tossed her head slightly, suggesting wordlessly that they return home. She turned and began to trot back the way she came, Sunburst following close behind. Let me see that smile, Posy. I'm going to take a picture. Keep brushing. Just turn your head. Posy giggled and tossed her head enough to get her mane out of her face and continued to run the brush through the back of her mane casually as she kept her focus on Sunburst. The click of the shutter and his broad smile was confirmation enough that he had gotten the shot he wanted. Her room had been recently painted, a quiet white colour, and a crib that had been built onto the bed. It was simply furnished with a new dresser that Sunburst had already covered with several other pictures he had taken of her. When they had planned the room, they both had the foal in mind. They used the same bed now, but they each knew that the foal would need her often initially, and had decided it best to have the foal's room prepared in a fashion that she could sleep there as well. You won't have any more room on the dresser for any pictures of the foal at the rate you're going, Sunburst. Put the camera down and help me up. We should eat before it gets too late. I've been getting worn out earlier and earlier in the day. Nurse Tenderheart told me it's a natural effect of how far along the pregnancy is, and not to worry. But I don't want to have you fixing dinner only to find me asleep on the couch when it's ready. Oh, and don't forget Cheerilee's coming over, so whatever you choose to make, do make enough for 3. Posy laughed shiftily and took his offered hoof, carefully pulling herself onto her feet, but still managing to provoke a groan as she settled her weight. She turned and set the brush onto the pillow, knocking the gift box. It had come in onto the floor between the wall and the headboard. A couple of wads of packing paper and a card spilled out, printed with text and a heart imposed over a replica of Sunburst cutie mark on the front. Her ears perked up as she noticed it when she stepped forward to retrieve the gift box. Sunburst hurried to her side as she vainly reached for it, her swollen belly preventing her from bending over enough to get a hold of the card. He reached down and brought it up for her to read the simple love poem he had composed and had printed on its face. Posy nuzzled him, small joyful tears rolling down her cheeks. She held her nose to his for a moment, then turned to leave the room. A gentle melody filled the room as she hummed softly. It only took Sunburst a moment to realise it was a nursery rhyme. He kept his eyes on her and a smile on his face until she had gotten into the hallway, then turned around and slid the card beneath her pillow and closed the door behind him. He was pleased to notice that she had stopped just outside to wait on him. He chuckled as she shook her hips in mild flirtation before she went on to the living room to rest and wait on their guest. Cheerilee was supposed to be over to see Posy shortly, as well as join them for dinner. The pair had been friends since they were little fillies. They had both gotten their cutie marks on the same day, started the trend for manes pressed into crazy zigzag patterns shortly before their senior prom, and shared countless other adventures together until the day Posy and Sunburst first met. Cheerilee had been with Posy the day Nurse Tenderheart confirmed Posy's pregnancy, and spent the rest of the days pestering Sunburst until she had convinced him to allow her to be at Posy's side with him when their foal was born. Sunburst could hardly disagree with her, given how long they have been friends, but as her due date had drawn closer, so had the frequency and lengths of her visits, with the exception of outings like the run earlier that day and regular visits to Nurse Tenderheart to ensure her and the foal's health. It seemed he was getting to spend less and less time alone with her. In recent weeks, he began to feel regret and annoyance at allowing Cheerilee's constant visits, though any time the other mare managed to get a laugh out of his love, the feelings would rapidly evaporate and be replaced by compassion for Posy and the foal she carried. He knew it was selfish to harbour such ill thoughts of her friend, even while preparing a simple dinner for them, though he could never stop wishing in silence that he wouldn't need to keep fixing meals for 3 each night. A knock on the door sent the growing dark emotions into a raging boil, only to be swiftly calmed by Posy's voice, bidding their visitor enter. He would do anything for Posy, even cast aside his negative emotions, though the desire to not share her with any pony, save her family, continued to greedily harbour a space at the front of his mind. As the pair began to cheerfully discuss the foal and the plans he and Posy had made, he banished the black remnants of undue hatred from his heart and let the love and cheer in Posy's voice fill the void. With his mind settled, he took his time finishing the sandwiches and tea, all the while humming the same nursery rhyme that Posy had chosen to before. It was only a lullaby, a soft and gentle tune meant for young colts and fillies to settle them into sleep, though with each note he could not help but feel more and more love for his wife and unborn foal. Something about the melody simply fit, and somehow he could imagine the soft voice of a filly singing it. He knew in his heart the voice did not belong to Posy, and no amount of thought could fit it to any other pony he knew. He shook his head in mild puzzlement as to why he should find any amount of importance in identifying the voice, though he could find it odd to hear "Hush now, quiet now" in a voice he didn't know. The scent of tea overbrewing snapped him back to the present. In a rush to prevent the brew from growing any stronger, he poured it into the waiting cups and moved them and the sandwiches to a tray. Quite prepared to escape the confusing thoughts he was concocting alone in the kitchen, he balanced the tray on his back and went out to join them. The three of them spoke for hours, mostly with the foal as the subject of discussion. At times, Sunburst would simply listen to Posy's caring voice and Cheerilee's happy banter, allowing them to stay occupied in discussion with one another, as he let his eyes remain locked on Posy. Seeing her so happy and so full of joy and life was more than enough for him to relinquish any remaining selfish thoughts. As the night wore on, Posy fell asleep on her couch while he and Cheerilee spoke. A long light snore startled them, as neither had taken her silence as out of the ordinary, and sent them into a fit of muffled laughter and giggles that shortly settled into loving grins directed at Posy's sleeping form. Sunburst let out a short, loving sigh as he got up and covered her with a light blanket they kept by her couch for just such an occasion. After kissing Posy's brow in a silent bid good night, he turned and motioned to Cheerilee, nodding towards the kitchen where they could talk without disturbing her. I'm surprised she stayed awake as long as she did, cheerily. Lately she's been so tired, and while we've been told not to worry, I cannot help but do just that. I love her with all that I am. I cannot help but worry for her well-being. Cheerily nodded, a knowing smile radiating feelings of caring and hope. She reached her hoof out and placed it on his shoulder as a comforting gesture. We all know how much you care for us, Sunburst. There are only warm and hopeful feelings for you both from every pony that the two of you know. Practically every pony in Ponyville is eager to hear whether you two have a colt or a filly. Then there is the number of rumours flying on what you two will be named the foal. In my opinion, you are the luckiest colt in the world to have her. We had convinced a unicorn pony to cast a spell to make it possible for me to walk on clouds. She pushed a cloud down for me to ride up to see Cloudsdale. We weren't too high up, yet still in the tree line, and her foot caught in a branch, sending my cloud spinning to the ground, and her head over tail to land on you. She was so embarrassed that she spent the next 10 minutes doing nothing but apologising and worrying over you. Though when you finally stood up and the pair of you locked eyes, even I knew what happened. We had both always joked about love at first sight, but I have no doubt that is what I saw that day. I should get going and let you go sit with her. I can tell the way you keep glancing back in there. That is what you want to do. I won't keep you, lover boy. I'll let myself out and you go to her. He managed to mutter thanks as she left, her recollection of their meeting bringing every joyful second of the encounter to mind. He squeezed a joyful tear from his eyes and returned to the living room, turning out lights as he went. The house draped in total darkness, he laid down alongside her couch and gently settled his head against her belly. The sounds of two hearts beating and gentle thumps with the foal, as the foal within shifted restlessly, carried him into a deep, peaceful sleep.